I have to say that I've been listening to Canadians really clearly. My friend and colleague in the British Columbia Green Party, who used to be my MLA, Adam Olsen, who's Startlift First Nation, used to say when the BC Greens had the balance of power, he'd say, no, it's the balance of responsibility. And I have to say, the weight of that responsibility has been sitting with me for a while. And obviously, the closer the vote got, and I started looking at, oh, it could be 171 to 171, then depending on abstentions, which you can't measure right now in our parliament. You can look around the room and see who's there, but then you know they could be voting on their apps somewhere else. I couldn't vote for that budget as I read it. I made it clear why I found it so very deficient. And one of the reasons was the Paris Agreement, and our commitment to it wasn't even mentioned. Our commitments to climate adaptation weren't mentioned, and I felt it weakened where we were on the nature agenda and the Convene-Montreal Agreement that wasn't mentioned. So, as you could tell, and as I've said for so often that I think I've spoken to all of you individually, I was still talking to the government, talking to people within the Prime Minister's office, talking to various ministers, to see if there was some way to remedy a document in print that I couldn't support. I think we found that way today. I heard overwhelmingly from my constituents and Canadians from coast to coast that they wanted someone to stop an election happening by accident. That's a place of responsibility. And I heard my own inner voice say, we're at the very edge of it being too late for us to be sure that our own children and grandchildren alive today can live in a livable world where human civilization is sustainable. Without what I heard from the Prime Minister today, I would have voted no. I didn't like the idea of ducking and abstaining, although that was a possibility. I wasn't afraid of an election for me personally, for the Green Party. But the answer is, I heard a firm commitment to something I hadn't heard before from Mark Carney, Prime Minister, that I'd heard previously from Mark Carney, former Governor of the Bank of Canada, former Governor of the Bank of England, former Special Envoy for Climate Finance to the Secretary General of the United Nations. I heard a firm commitment we will meet our Paris targets. That requires action very soon because the first target we're going to hit is 2030 and then 2035. Legally binding treaty commitments and a commitment to do far more that we've heard in the budget with funding for the coming Montreal commitments to nature, to stop beating up on Mother Earth and start the process of CPR. So, against what I had expected to say to you today, I'm going to vote yes. For the country, for the planet, and for my hope in the future. The Liberals can't count on me voting confidence in the government again without delivering on the words I heard. C'est pour moi une question de responsabilité, une responsabilité grave pour ma circonscription, pour mon pays, pour mes proches, ma petite-fille. I will vote yes to avoid an election. I will vote yes in the confidence that the Prime Minister heard my pleas and committed to meeting our legally binding commitments under the Paris Agreement, committing to reconciliation, committing to action for adaptation to protect us from the extreme events we can no longer avoid, et aussi pour le processus de réconciliation avec les peuples autochtones de ce pays. So that's where I am right now.
Qu'est-ce que vous dites à ceux qui vont dire qu'il n'y a pas rien de legally binding? Ils ne seraient pas forcés de respecter l'accord de Paris avec ça?
Oui, mais je pense qu'avec la réponse dans le contexte de la question, c'est que maintenant, je reste confiant qu'il comprend bien que c'est un processus. Le traité de Paris est notre traité sur cadre de changement climatique des Nations Unies. Il comprend bien que c'est une obligation légale. Je suis confiant qu'il le comprend et il a confirmé qu'il, comme Premier ministre, et maintenant et pour l'avenir sera engagé pour atteindre les objectifs de notre engagement sur l'accord de Paris.
All I heard was the Prime Minister say he'd respect the targets. I didn't hear him say anything more, that he would work faster, change anything that was already in the budget. So why is that enough for you?
I heard him commit to the targets. That is what I needed to hear. And I hear a commitment to work towards achieving them, which will not be easy. We will have to work. We will have to continue to see if we can get this Parliament to work together. It's a minority Parliament. I'm not giving them any kind of blank check. But one has to reach out at a time when we're in a fragile situation vis-a-vis Canada versus Trump. One has to hope that Canadians can trust each other enough to say that was a commitment. I heard a commitment. And if they want to parse it and say you didn't hear what you heard, they'll pay for that, because I'm trusting but not gullible. I want to see we will work together across party lines, because I'm not the only person who cares about climate in that House. The Bloc Québécois members care a lot about climate. The NDP members care a lot about climate, and so do a lot of Liberals, and so do a lot of Conservatives who don't say so out loud because they don't want to contradict their leader. But there, we are not unlike the population of Canada. As members of Parliament, as human beings, we understand when we lose $8.5 billion worth of insurable losses last year alone. I remember the first time that the National Roundtable on Environment and Economy repealed and eliminated under Stephen Harper. But the first time they put out a projection, some of you may remember when they put out a projection that, we could see in future as much as $5 billion a year in losses due to climate events. 2024, $8.5 billion, and the trauma and the emotional effect of being evacuated from your home over and over again. 619 British Columbians died in 4 days in the summer of 2021. I need to understand that the Prime Minister and his government see that this is an emergency and that they will commit and act. Maybe today wasn't enough. Maybe I'm a fool. I'll leave that for history to decide, but I did what I thought was right, and that's what I do.
The budget also, though, says, for example, that they're considering lifting the industrial, like the oil and gas emissions cap, right? So how do you square those two things? The government that's signaling this, and you're saying respect the Paris
I'm saying even with all that, you can deliver on your targets, but you don't use the tools that you've already discarded. You use different tools, and we get there.
Has the Prime Minister committed what he said in there privately to you? Has he said that before?
Person to person, no, but through channels, yes.
So this has been the negotiation over the last number of days, that he makes this statement in question period today, because you weren't scheduled to have a question today. You were given that question, right? Is that the deal?
Absolutely. This is the first time the Prime Minister has ever, even when I'm scheduled to ask a question, the Prime Minister doesn't answer my question. So this is the first. I mean, the other Prime Ministers have in the past. This was not where I started. I started with a different. Negotiations are like that. I started with a different way of approaching this. How can we fix this? And I'd have to say collaboratively with a number of people involved, and I'm not going to list them all off, but a lot of conversations with different ministers and different people in the Prime Minister's circle and the Prime Minister personally over the last, since November 4th, over the last 13 days, conversations inside and outside of Ottawa until we got to this proposal of what if.
What about with different parties, though? What about with the NDP? Have you talked to them? Do you have any idea how Don Davies and the other 6 MPs are
I wanted to let them know how I'm voting now, so if they're calculating and crunching numbers, it doesn't take them by surprise.
So do you think this is all theater today, or do you think there's a real chance that this budget could fail?
I still think there's a chance, but it's not going to be. I know that there are a lot of us in the Green Party who'd love an election. Honestly, there are. I know that the weight of messages I've received from constituents is that they don't. But I couldn't make a decision based on expediency. That's not where I'm at. I'm a really angry grandmother. That's where I'm at. And I want to see climate action, and I don't want to see fossil fuel subsidies. Yeah, they're still there in the budget, but a commitment to get away from them is going to be essential if we're going to deliver on commitments. But more than that, we can't be building fossil fuel infrastructure. We can't pretend that there's a world in which we avoid the worst. And the worst is something no one wants to talk about. Climate science is not about whether we experience climate change or not. We're clearly in it. As I said, we've billions of dollars of losses, hundreds of people dead. We're in it. What we have to avoid is what happens if we don't reduce emissions quickly enough so that when we stabilize at a new equilibrium of where greenhouse gases are within our global atmospheric system, we actually can preserve such things as a frozen Arctic. We can preserve frozen permafrost. We can avoid ocean currents shifting to such an extent that human civilization is in a state of permanent geopolitical insecurity, national security concerns. Basically, what Professor Thomas Homer Dixon abbreviates by just calling it the Mad Max world. I do not want my grandchildren growing up in a dystopian fiction of Mad Max. We have to hang on to human civilization, and Canadians have to do it by hanging on to each other with both hands and learning how we prevent climate chaos and doing it together. And this answer today in question period is not a glorious finale, but it is a start.
Any indication of what's in this nature plan the Prime Minister talked about? Oh, do you have any indication what's in this nature plan the Prime Minister talked about?
Oh, yes. Well, we know that it's been in the works for quite a long time. I can't speak to it. I'm not a cabinet member, but I expect, obviously, I'm not a Liberal. I expect that what we need to see for delivery is funding for new protection for natural spaces, more funding for the Indigenous Guardian Program, as an example. Obviously, when I speak of reconciliation, and this is me talking, not speaking for the government, obviously I have no business speaking for the government, but the kinds of things I would expect to see in the nature agenda are assistance to ensure that in the course of Indigenous partnerships, we see more land protected for forever of sustainable, healthy ecosystems that allow Indigenous traditional practices to continue. There's a big chunk of what a nature agenda looks like. 30% of marine and terrestrial Canadian nature being protected by 2030 was ambitious when it was negotiated in Montreal at COP15. At the time, I knew it was ambitious. I was there for the negotiations. It can be realized, but not without a lot of hard work. None of these commitments that I was asking them for are easy. None of them are easy. If it was easy, it would have been done already. But they're necessary. And I think Canadians recognize that when people of goodwill who are responsible and recognize that the weight of an elected office, even a small space that I occupy as the Member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands, requires thoughtful, considered, responsible actions where you know you can deliver on what you've requested and you know that you do it in the interest of your country and all Canadians, our economy, yes, and the planet, yes, and we do it together. It's not going to be easy, but it is doable, totally doable, if we have the political will to stick with it and not run away every time things get tough.
Pouvez-vous nous expliquer pourquoi vous avez changé d'idée en français? Vous l'avez dit en anglais, mais qu'est-ce qui vous a fait changer d'idée aujourd'hui?
Oui, c'est changé. C'est la première fois que j'ai écouté que le Premier ministre a dit clairement qu'il est engagé pour les cibles fixes d'accord de Paris. Ça, c'est clair. Et aussi pour les changements dans le budget pour les fonds pour la nature, pour le projet de Convene Montréal, pour protéger la nature, 30% par l'année 2030. C'est des objectifs ambitieux, mais c'est vraiment possible, il reste possible, mais rien n'est possible sans l'engagement du gouvernement pour protéger la nature, pour protéger le climat, pour protéger les vies des Canadiens, les propriétés des Canadiens, dans toutes nos villes et communautés. La crise du changement climatique, maintenant, reste une menace sérieuse, mais n'est pas mentionné dans le budget. C'est pour moi incroyable. Mais maintenant, le Premier ministre était début et il a parlé clairement de son engagement pour atteindre les cibles de Paris et de Convene, Montréal, et pour protéger les vies des Canadiens partout au Canada. That's what I heard.
Mais c'est pas un gain. Les libéraux s'étaient déjà engagés. Qu'est-ce que vous avez gagné? Vous avez gagné le statu quo?
Je ne faisais pas un status quo parce que hier, c'est pas possible de dire que j'ai écouté un Premier ministre qui dit seulement pour son engagement. Alors, un budget, c'est aussi quelque chose. Je me souviens beaucoup des lignes dans les budgets de passer. Nous avons les moments où un Premier ministre d'un budget a fait une promesse cassée, brisée. Mais maintenant, pour moi, ça suffit parce que j'utilise le moment où j'ai la responsabilité, comme député, comme chef de Parti vert, de faire les choses pour que j'ai écouté très clairement les voix des Canadiens. S'il vous plaît, pas une élection maintenant. That's not enough to move my vote, mais je pense à mon pays, je pense à nous sommes en lutte maintenant contre les États-Unis avec les menaces et la réalité des tarifs et la lutte de commerce. J'ai les autres idées. Je n'ai pas demandé au Premier ministre ou exigé qu'il prenne toutes mes idées. Mais pour moi, c'est une question morale. Je ne suis pas, comme député maintenant, comme militant, écolo, d'accepter un budget qui part avec une seule mention de la question de pas seulement l'enjeu du changement climatique, les mots très neutres. Non, nous sommes dans une crise et pour moi, j'exige d'écouter mon Premier ministre, de parler de façon claire de son engagement d'atteindre les cibles de Paris. Et pour moi, c'est un grand changement tout à fait différent d'hier.
Ms. May, this budget contains LNG tax credits, CCUS tax credits. The Prime Minister has put his weight behind 2 LNG plants since coming to power with his major project list. How do you weigh all of that against one statement in question period and say that he's committed to climate change?
It's not easy. I'm prepared to go out and get arrested fighting those same damn pipelines. But for now, I want to make sure that Canada is committed to achieving our Paris targets, and I will do everything I can to get us off fossil fuel subsidies. But what I wanted more than anything was to ensure that this government going forward was committed to achieving what's legally binding Paris Agreement targets. Today is the first time I heard that. And if I've been naive and I've settled for too little, I'm sure I'll hear about it. But I just speak honestly to you and hope that I'm not wrong. Thank you.
How you doing? Sorry? Is your budget going to pass today? Listen, it's really a question for the opposition. You know, we have delivered for Canadians, and I hope they can feel the mood of the nation. Canadians wants to go forward, and that's the plan to bring Canada forward. And so it's really a question for the opposition.
What about, are you going to Pardon?
Are you going to vote against the budget?
We're going to vote against the budget.
Is it going to be a whipped vote? All your caucus aligned on that?
Pardon?
Is all of your caucus aligned on that?
Yes.
Do you expect every Conservative MP to vote against it then?
Yes.
Coming your way today? How's the budget vote?
You tell me. You always know more than I do.
What do you think? How do you think it's going to go up? It's going to pass?
I think it's going to pass.
How?
we get more votes than I don't know the mechanics yet. I wish I did.
Okay.
But look, I'm confident it'll pass. These things have a way of working themselves out, I believe. I just spent a week in my constituency. I did not talk to a single person and say, can you please have an election? And I talked to a lot of people about the budget, and they're quite positive. So I just don't see a scenario where this doesn't succeed.
For the everyday people in your constituency, what did they take away from the budget? Like, what did you hear that they are looking at this and saying, yeah?
Well, I'll give you an example. So on Tuesday, we all spent time, at Remembrance Day ceremonies. I spoke with a lot of veterans and a lot of people who are in the military now, and they're all incredibly grateful for the increased expenditure on the military. Some of them were not brought to tears, but it was quite emotional for them. They feel the support, and that's a big part of the budget. And I feel very positive about that, and I'm proud of that. So, and I think that's a reflection of other parts of the budget as well. Honestly, and I'm not just saying this for political reasons, everybody I spoke to was positive. They're happy with the direction of the government, and people were telling me, please, we don't want an election. So that's the sentiment I came back with. So I'm confident it'll happen. How? We'll know at 6:15. Anyway, fingers crossed, but I don't think we need to cross our fingers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Y a-t-il des changements dans le budget qu'on a eu le 4 novembre dernier? Pas de changement?
Est-ce que tous les conservateurs vont voter?
En bloc? Je peux pas parler pour mes collègues.
Fifth time in 112 years. I'm happy for the 3 Saskatchewan-born players. I mean, Corey Mace has done a heck of a job. And as you know, the Hilltops have won the junior championship. The Riders have won the CFL. This Saturday, the Huskies go for youth sports, so it could be a triple header for Saskatchewan.
But are you ready for an election in Saskatoon?
We are. We'll see what happens. I don't think the public wants it, but we'll see what happens.
Do you think we will end up in the election?
See tonight.
Will your caucus vote against it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
No abstentions on the Conservative side?
I don't know. I know I'm voting against it. I only worry about Kevin.
Hello, Mr. Gear. Could we ask you if
You'll
states...
pass the budget today.
I think Canadians don't want an election, and I think parliamentarians have heard them. So I am quite confident, but I will be in my seat and I'll be voting.
Do you know how the opposition is going to vote? Ready to go for an election?
Always ready.
Yeah?
Always ready. You gotta be ready.
Do you think you need to be? Are you worried about that?
We're always ready. We're always ready.
Do you think this isn't going to pass today?
I think the budget's gonna pass. I hope it does. And we're ready. If not, and if I were Mr. Poilievre, I'd be thinking long and hard about whether or not I want to put people through that.
It's more about the NDP, though. The Conservatives have been pretty clear about how they're going to vote. What do you think the voters would react if the NDP ends up not putting up the numbers or putting too many numbers ahead so that the budget doesn't pass?
Again, you're going to have to ask the NDP. I have, we all have a lot of friends on that side of the House. They're good people. I think they are the kind of folks that understand that Canadians don't want to go to the polls over Christmas, and I think the last message sent a pretty clear message to where centrist and centre-left voters in this country are placing their bets.
What would it mean for British Columbians if we're all of a sudden thrust into an election campaign again?
I think it means for British Columbia what it means for the rest of the country, uncertainty. I think it sends a message very, very clearly that the things that are important for British Columbia, these major projects that we have now being worked our way through, the investments that we're proposing to make in healthcare infrastructure, things that are important to my province, that those things are going to be put on hold. And folks that trigger an election are going to have to answer those questions as to why they jeopardize the very things that British Columbia and the Premier of British Columbia, the Government of British Columbia, have been asking our government to do. So those are questions that I think anyone that wants to trigger an election is going to have to think about long and hard.
Do you think that your caucus has done a good enough job negotiating with the other parties? I mean, it's pretty down to the wire here.
I don't speak about negotiations, and I think it's a matter of course to negotiate, to talk about what negotiations may not be happening.
That you're going to avoid an election with this budget?
I'm optimistic. I think this is a budget that helps support the people of Canada with the issues they care about, affordability, housing, a range of other issues, growing the economy, etc. in the short term, but also in the long term. It's about investing and building a strong economy that's more resilient. It allows us to take greater control and autonomy over our economy and be more prosperous in the long term. So I'm confident that MPs are going to support it.
Comment vous allez réussir à le faire adopter? Vous allez avoir le soutien de qui d'autre que les libéraux?
Les détails, je ne peux pas rentrer dans les détails, mais parce que assez. Non, j'ai de la confiance que les députés vont appuyer le budget parce que c'est un budget qui investit pour appuyer les Canadiens à court terme, pour aider avec l'abordabilité, avec les domiciles et le logement, pour accroître l'économie, mais aussi investit pour le long terme, à bâtir une économie plus forte, plus indépendante, plus souveraine. Et donc, je pense que les députés, j'espère que les députés vont l'appuyer.
Est-ce que le gouvernement en a assez fait pour négocier avec les autres partis?
Je ne suis pas dans toutes les conversations, c'est difficile de répondre à ça en détail, mais je sais qu'on a fait tous les efforts possibles pour obtenir l'appui des autres partis. J'espère de l'avoir. Merci beaucoup. Merci, thank you.
So, is the budget going to pass today? What do you think?
I'm confident that we're working for Canadians and we have a strong budget that delivers for our economy.
Do you have the numbers to deliver?
Minister, are you going to support the budget?
I will not be supporting the budget.
Why?
Well, for one, this week we commemorated 4 years since the most costly disaster in the history of Canada, the floods and landslides that wiped out all major critical infrastructure for the province of British Columbia, many of which is in my former riding and current riding. We had the Prime Minister in White Rock the other day talking about supporting a peer. How do you think the people of Abbotsford feel that he'll come to British Columbia for a Prime Minister that talks about supply chains and expanding trade to the Asia Pacific? Guess what? You can't do any of that until you eliminate the risk that exists in Abbotsford with the CN, the CP Rail, the Trans-Canada Highway, which goes into the Coquihalla Highway, and the Southern Railway, the border crossing, the Abbotsford International Airport. All of that needs to be addressed by the federal government. They're not signaling right now that they're willing to step up and do what's right for BC. And secondly, I'm worried about future generations and all of the comments made by the Parliamentary Budget Officer about how much money is being spent and where that money in fact is going. Thank you.
Question. Oh, you did?
That wasn't me.
Oh, okay. Look, we're going to go into tonight. There's lots of measures that we think are important for Canadians. As we would have heard in question period, we expect that there's measures that all opposition parties should be able to find something to support in this budget. It supports social programs that matter for Canadians. At the same time, it recalibrates public spending, makes historic investments in defence. The opposition and those members are going to have to carefully consider whether or not they want to send us back to an election at Christmas, 6 months after we were just given a mandate. I don't think that's very smart, so I'm hopeful and optimistic it'll pass.
Have you struck any deals with the opposition parties?